Hi friends, welcome to this video. This video we are going to see how to make a communication between two systems using socket programming in Python. So now we have two systems. So system 1 and system 2. So these two systems wants to communicate with each other or to transfer a data between them, sending a data and receiving a data. So if you want to provide a communication between two systems, we can use the socket programming. So now we will see how to do the socket programming with Python coding. And now first, what is meant by a socket? So now socket is an endpoint of communication. Endpoint of communication. So it can be acting as an interface between two computers so that you can connect the two computers, because in a network we are not going to connect the two systems with cables or wires. So socket is in software. So through that endpoint in one computer with the another computer socket, we are going to provide a communication. So mainly socket will be identified by two things. One is by using the IP address, or socket contain two information. So one is the IP address and port number. So you know the IP address is used to uniquely identify a computer or a system in the network. And the port number is the service. So you want to identify a service running in a computer. So the port number is used to identify the particular service running in a computer. So now we have system 1, it may be available in somewhere else. System 2, it will be available in somewhere else. So we need to create two programs. So one program called system1.python, which is running in the system 1, and system2.python, which is running in the another system, system 2. So now we want to make a communication between them so that we can send the data between to and fro. And now we have socket programming itself. We have two types. So one is called as TCP and another one is called as UDP. So you may aware these words when you study with the computer network. So TCP is mainly connection oriented. TCP is connection oriented, and also there is no data loss. Okay, so here what happened? First the connection is established, then the data transfer will happen, and finally once the transfer is finished, the connection get closed. And next is UDP. So UDP, you are having connection less. So whenever there is a data, it will be sent. So we are not having any predefined data connection. So whenever there is a data, it will be sent and the connection get closed. So connectionless, and there may be a data loss. So we are not having any acknowledgement whether the data is received or not. Okay, so now this session we are going to see how to use socket programming with TCP. And if you want to implement socket programming in Python, we need to first import a module called a socket module that only support all the functionalities related to create sockets. And these are some of the basic methods which is used to access the functionalities of socket. So first one is the socket method, which will create a socket object. It is not a method actually, it is a class which is available in the socket module and which is used to create the socket object. And bind method is used to bind the IP address and the port number. Listen, so the system is listening for a request coming from outside. And connect, which is used to connect the system with the server. And accept, so once the connection is established, we are accepting the request from the server and we start to send the data between client and server. So generally we will assume this architecture as a client system architecture or client server architecture. So one will be acting as your server and one will be acting as your client. Okay, so we are making a communication between them. And now for our implementation or a simulation, we are making both the systems to be kept in our local computer. So I have my computer. So in my computer itself, I will create two programs. So one program is system1.py and another one is system2.py. So these two programs wants to communicate with each other. So I am going to implement in the same system. So I will identify my system with the local host with the IP address 127.0.0.1. So maybe this program will running in a port number 2000 and this program will be running in a port number 3000. So if you have two systems, so you keep one program in one system, one program in another system, and they can able to communicate. You need to know the IP address of the system 1 and IP address of the system 2 so that you can make a communication between them. And how this communication has happened. So this diagram explains you how the communication has happened. So inside your socket module, we have a class called a socket class. So this socket class will create a socket object first. So this may be acting as system 1 and this may be acting as system 2. So system 1 is creating a socket object. So while we creating a socket object, so basically the socket class, you send two information. The first information is the IP family, that is your protocol, what protocol we want to use, that is IPv4 or IPv6, that is the internet protocol family. Then followed by what type of socket programming, whether it is TCP or you are going to use with UDP. So once the socket object is created, the next step is binding. So this system may be running in an IP address of 168.2.7 and the service is running in a port number 3000. So the bind will have a tuple, the tuple having a socket information about the IP address and the port number. And now the system is ready to listen any request is coming from outside. So it is listening, okay, it's listening any request is coming from outside. At the same time, the other system may be a client creating a socket. So it also create a socket object. After creating a socket object, so it also bind it with its address. So it is optional. So here its address may be 128.168.128.3.21 and here the service may be running in an port number 2000. So it is the corresponding IP address of the system 2. So now it's binded and by using the connect function, it will have the input of again a tuple with the IP address of your system 1, that is your server, and the port number. So this system 2 is wants to connect with which system, so that address will be given as a tuple inside the connect. So already the system is listening for a request. So now the connect request is given, immediately the connection has established. So it will accept the request coming from the other system. When it accepting, it will return two arguments. It will return two arguments. One is a new socket which will be used in the system 1 for sending and receiving the data. The another one is the client socket. That is the system who is connecting with the server, that client's information will be available in the client socket. So these two information will be written back. So once the connection has done, next we have only two methods, that is send and receive. So by using send and receive, we can start to communicate between the client and server. And here we are going to demonstrate a one-way chat application. One-way chat application between a client and the server. Between the client and the server using a TCP-Socket programming. So that only we are going to do today for this session. So now we will, so after finishing all the things, finally we need to close the connection using a close method. So now we are going to our Python environment. So I am using a PyCharm. So now my system 1, so I am making my system 1 as a server. So first step, I need to import my socket module. So import socket. And the next step, you need to create a socket object. So socket object. So when I create a socket object, I need to use with the module name dot class name. So here you can see here socket. Okay, so here you can click it and you can check for documentation. It will be checking class socket. Okay, so here the thing is socket. So it needs two information. So one is the IP family, and the next one is the what type of protocol we are going to use. So the first one is the IP family, that is AF-INET, that is Internet Protocol IPv4. And the next one is socket.sock stream. What type of socket? TCP protocol, socket stream. If we are using UDP, that is a datagram. So now we are using TCP, so socket stream. So the next step is binding. Okay, so binding the or identifying the IP address and the port number of the system. So we are going to reserve a port number to provide a service in the system. So for that we need to bind the socket object to reserve a port number. So for that we are using s.bind. So here I am going to use both the system1, system2 be in the same computer. So I need to use with my, so here the input should be a tuple. So I need to give my local system, okay, 0.1, comma, and one port number. So what is meant by this port number? I told that port number is used to provide or identify a particular service. So there may be a port number from 0 to 65535. In that 0 to 1023 is already occupied by predefined services. So you cannot use 0 to 1023. So you can use 1024 to 65535. So I have assigned 2000. And the next step is we are keep our system in the listening mode. So now our system is ready to accept some request. So it is listening whether any request is coming. So once it is done, okay, so some request is coming from a client means it will accept the request. Accept the request. So when it accepts the request, okay, the accept method will return two outputs. So one is the new socket, which we will use further to send and receive the message. The another one is the other systems socket. Okay, so now I will assign this a client systems socket. Okay, whoever giving a request to the server, so that system socket information. So once it is done, I need to print that information. So I am printing connection established. Okay, so I want to know from which client the request has come. So I need to print the client socket information. So basically this is a tuple. You cannot directly print it. So you need to convert it into a string. Yes, it's done. Okay, so now your server want to send some data. So I will get from the user and send it. So I will tell input. Okay, so server wants to get some input from the user, and that input it want to send it. So using this my socket, the new socket object, I am going to send this message. Okay, whenever you send the message, the string cannot be directly sent. So it need to be converted as a bytes. When it to be converted as a bytes, it should be encoded. So we need to tell what type of encoding we need. Okay, there are two type of encoding. One is ASCII and another one is UTF. So 8-bit UTF encoding we are putting. So now the data is sent. So once it is finished, I am closing my socket. Okay, this is my server side. So the system is finished. I created a socket, I have binded and listening for some request is coming. Once the request is coming, I will accept and then I try to send the data from the server side. And now I am going to simulate my client. Okay, so client also same thing. I will import the socket and next I will create the socket object. Socket.socket. I will pass socket dot the family name AF-INET, then socket dot the stream name socket stream. Okay, next I will bind it. Now both my client server available in the same system. So I am going to give 127.0.0.1 and the port number I will assign some other thing. So for my server I assign port number 2000 and for my client I assign port number is 3000. Okay, so now I am trying to connect my client with the server. So I'm using a method called as connect. I want to connect to whom? I want to connect with the client. How I will identify my client? How I will identify my server? Because I want to connect my client with the server. So I want to identify my server. So my server will be identified by the IP address and followed by the port number. Because I know already I have assigned my server with the IP address and the port number, and that thing I have assigned. So now the connection get established with my server. So already server has sent some message. So now I want to receive it. So using my socket, I am going to receive the message. Whenever I receive the message, it will be stored in a buffer. So this is a maximum size of the buffer. You can give 100, 200, anything. So I have given the maximum size of the buffer. So that will be getting in a variable. And this message already it is in the encoded format, so you cannot directly use it. So it should be decoded. So I'm going to write print. This is a message coming from the server. Okay. So I'm going to write what is the message received. Message. I'm going to decode it because it's in the encoded format, so it should be decoded. So the decoding method is again UTF. So finally, I need to again close my socket. So socket close. So now this is my client program is ready and my server program is ready. So whenever you have two programs running in the same computer, so the first thing you need to remember, you need to run the server first. So I'm going to run my server first. Okay, now my server is ready. Next, I need to run my client. Okay, yes. So now in my server, okay, server is ready and client is giving a connect. So server is accepting. So I can go and check. Yes, server has accepted the connection from the client, which is running in the port number 3000. This is the client port number and this is the server port number. Server port number. So now I have accepted the connection with my client. So now my server is giving a message. Hello client. Okay, because you know that here my server is inputting some information and sending it to my client. So hello client. I press enter key. Immediately I go and check in my client. Yes, so I got a message from my server. Hello client. So I think you have understand how the socket program is established with Python coding in order to provide a one-way communication. Next video, we will see how you can provide a two-way chat application using socket programming. Thank you.